Hello viewers, welcome to the show. I am Abhishek Bhadra and today we have Mr. Soma Subhradas with us on the show. Mr. Soma Subhradas is a PhD scholar in film studies from Jadavpur University, and today we are going to discuss on the radical thinkers of Frankfurt School. So please tell about the radical thinkers of the Frankfurt School.
We have already discussed the facets of Frankfurt School, and one quotation by Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi propaganda minister, will suffice why we are discussing about the Frankfurt School thinkers. He said, which all the media channels, media industries follow blindly, if you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. That's what the media believes in a very strong manner. Joseph Goebbels, the fascist regime, Hitler, Mussolini, Nazis, they are all defeated. But the thought of media and how to manipulate people's mind using media started by them is still being continued, quite interestingly, still being continued over the whole world.
Yeah.
Frankfurt School thinkers primarily talked about the role of media and how it helped the rise of the fascist governments and the rise of advanced capitalism. Okay. A few points that they made were: United States produced, promoted and propagated popular commercial culture. Now, by commercial culture, I do not mean folk culture or the culture that we have in our villages or in our traditional spaces where it doesn't have any kind of transactional value. When you package it, when you package a folk song, when you disperse the product in the market, when a kind of a financial return comes, then it is a popular culture. And you make the people believe that this culture has a huge quality and validity. In this way, as Indian media is also one of the biggest nowadays in the whole world, and we have plethora of channels and millions of advertisements running 24/7 on our television screens, feeding the domestic environment. Okay, now advertisements, as the Frankfurt School thinkers would say, they do not sell commodities. They sell values, they sell a kind of a lifestyle, and they sell institutions. Institutions in the sense, institutions of thoughts, idea of success, idea of progress. Okay, if you work in a huge company which has a huge turnover, then you're a successful man. But if you work in a village as one of the government officers, your success is questionable. This is the American way of life. We all know American way of life is of free enterprise, no government control, no state control, and you have your freedom only through capital. So they believe in a kind of a life where capital plays a huge role. So that is a kind of a point of view. There is nothing good and bad about it, but this was very much criticized by the Frankfurt School thinkers. So ideologically, in each and every, as you can see Hollywood, you can see various channels, prints, internet, websites, huge amount of all the facets of media. You will find whichever comes from America or whichever comes from the West or even from our country, they will be promoting their own ideas which will serve their financial interest.
So do you mean they are rather than promoting, they're injecting their ideas into us?
Of course. Okay. That's what the whole point is. Yes, that's okay. What the Frankfurt thinkers viewed it. It should be mentioned here that there are more than 50 brilliant thinkers who have hailed from the Frankfurt School carrying the tradition, but due to limitation in our scope of discussion, we will be sticking to 5 major and pioneering thinkers. The first and foremost thinkers without whom we, in cultural studies, we can't think of anything is Walter Benjamin. Now, Walter Benjamin was not directly related to the Frankfurt School, but he belonged, as the popular saying is, he belonged to the outer school, the outer circle of the Frankfurt School. But he was in constant contact with the major pioneers or the members of the inner circle like Marcuse, Adorno and Horkheimer. He is still considered to be a true Marxist, and he was a philosopher and art critic. He has some major seminal works on city, on urban space, on cinema and theatre. So his scope of work is very gratifying for people who are into cultural studies.
Yeah.
One of his major points with which he contested with the other members of the inner circle of the Frankfurt School was the aspect of technology. Now, the Frankfurt School thinkers who were from the inner circle, they were very much critical about the advent of new technology, and they viewed that the advent of new technology is entirely used, can be entirely used by the people who financially dominate the whole world. Benjamin, why I have picked Benjamin as the first critical thinker to be discussed here, is that in today's world, it has been proven that Walter Benjamin was to an extent right. Think about new media. Think about internet. Internet was introduced, of course, Adorno is right in their own ways. Internet was introduced in order to promote business, in order to reach to larger mass of people in no time. More than television, more than print, internet is much more immediate, right?
Yeah.
But now we can see that internet has become a challenge for the financial interests. Downloads, sharing, group activities, social and political upheavals, everything is found in internet. Everything. Now there are certain news which cannot be disseminated through other forms of media. Internet is the only place where you can uphold your views. After 70 years of Walter Benjamin's death, we realize that how true he was. Anyway, his major work is Work of Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction, in which he talks about the liberating aspect of media. That's what we were discussing right now, the liberating aspect of media. For example, if a person doesn't have the capacity to see the frescoes of the Sistine Chapel, it's the media which can reproduce the image and can help that person to see it. He doesn't have to travel to Italy in order to see that. So technology, media has shrunk the world in the interest of the common people. That's what Walter Benjamin felt. His other major works were Baudelaire, arguably the first modernist poet and the symbolist poet of France, Charles Baudelaire. Kafka, we all know about Franz Kafka, the existential writer from Germany. Brecht and Epic Theatre, again a Marxist revolutionary playwright called Bertolt Brecht, with whom Walter Benjamin worked a lot, and his new form of theatre, revolutionary theatre called Epic Theatre. All these works were there in one of his best books called Illuminations. As I said, he advocated to turn art forms into a forum of political enlightenment rather than cheap entertainment. Now, what do you mean by, turning art forms into a kind of a forum of political enlightenment or people's consciousness? Of course, again, we have to come back to the role of media and how it liberates a common man. Think about new media. Think about the digital world where even you or I can make a film which was not possible 30 years ago. So in this way, no one is there to put his ideological or political values on you. If you have the technology, if you have the access, you make your point clear.
But we still gather all those ideologies in ourselves, right?
Of course, but still, that's what he is saying. Still, technology provides you the room to express your own self. Theodor Ludwig Wiesengrund Adorno, popularly known as Theodor Adorno. He was a major thinker from the inner circle of Frankfurt School. And he was a sociologist, philosopher, and quite importantly, till now, he's one of the most influential musicologists. He used to interpret and study music. And in composition, in structuring, in arrangement of music, most of the times we do not understand, right? Now, whether the music has any purpose or not. But people like Theodor Adorno put up studies on music pieces, and he propounded a lot of facts which opened our eyes. He was the first person who incorporated the thoughts of Marx and Sigmund Freud. So he mixed Marxism and psychoanalysis in order to understand culture industry. Culture industry is a major term which he, along with Horkheimer, put up, where culture, according to the Frankfurt School thinkers, is a kind of a manipulated environment which is just produced like a commodity. Culture becomes commodity in advanced capitalist society. His major works, Dialectic of Entertainment with Horkheimer, Minima Moralia, Negative Dialectics, and Aesthetic Theory. As the names of the essays suggest, that all these works are major intervention in critical thinking process, and it has shaped the way the scholars think nowadays. Some of his strongest points that he made was, he argued that the advanced capitalism has obliterated the forces that would destroy itself. Now, according to classical Marxism, bourgeois communication will reach at such a stage that it will collapse on itself. And the class conflicts will go to such a height that inevitably there will be a revolution.
Okay.
But as I had already made this point clear in the previous discussion, that you do not have the capitalist system, advanced capitalism is such an advanced and an intelligent system where all the classes are fused under a big group called consumers.
Everyone is a
You
consumer.
have all the facilities of a commercial culture. Cell phones, television, shopping malls, everything. So there's no crisis. And if you do not have any crisis, how can you have any kind of contention or contempt? Or how can you distinguish yourself with that another person? So the class conflict, the class distinction is always there, but it is hidden under the cloak of commercial culture.
Okay.
That's what he thought. Each and every individual has been turned into a consumer through commercial culture, which is quite evident.
Why individual turned into a consumer?
Have you ever seen any advertisement which addresses you in a plural way? No.
Okay.
Okay? You can win. Not all of you can win. So, the very logic of consumerization is making the individual into an atomized state. Atomized state in the sense, we all know that atoms of the same molecule, they have same characteristic, right?
Yeah.
Individuals, they differ, but not the atoms. Atoms are the smallest pieces, just like the consumers. But all the consumers, they are addressed in an individual way, but all the consumers do the same thing. That's what he meant. Hence, an individual's consciousness is jeopardized and his revolutionary instincts are destroyed. Of course, I have cell phone, I have Facebook, I have shopping mall, I have television, I have whatever I want, all the materialistic gains. So where is my crisis? Why shall I go on the street and start revolting? Do I have any crisis as an individual? Because we are all consumers. So, rightly put by him is that his consciousness is jeopardized because he is living in a world of plenty. Plenty in the sense not his basic needs, but just the superficial needs. So, if I can make an individual understand that his freedom lies in the materialistic gain, then of course he will have no complaints. In that way, on one hand, I am turning an individual into a consumer, ideal consumer, and on the other hand, I am pacifying his or destroying his revolutionary instincts. Society is media driven, we all know, at least now we all know it. And capitalism forces us to consume products. Of course, without media, we wouldn't have known about any products. We wouldn't have known about brands. We wouldn't have known about anything. So, of course, media is one of the main weapons of advanced capitalism. Now, these words are quite accepted for us because we have been talking, the common people have been talking, but for the first time, Adorno made these points, and at that point of time, it was a revolutionary act. Max Horkheimer. He was the director, at one point of time, he was the director of the Frankfurt School, and he introduced the interdisciplinary studies. He introduced the role of Marx and psychoanalysis, and he said that from now onwards, the role of Frankfurt School or the direction of work for the Frankfurt School will be radically different. He was the person who radicalized Marxism, who radicalized social critical theory. Now, one of his major points was the relationship between affect, which is in a way we can understand as suffering, and social concepts and structures, individual realities, which is proliferated by commodities. Now, these individual realities, of course, we all have individual realities. We all have certain kind of effects, right? Certain kind of crisis that we indulge into. All these things and certain sufferings, all these things in a modern man's life, in an industrial life, in a life where everything is infested by the capitalist ideas, you have the role of commodities in a very subtle way.
Yeah.
Let me give you a very ordinary example. In today's world, we study, we go to colleges, we go through various institutions, we ensure that we get good marks, we ensure that all the teachers like us, only for the fact, it has boiled down to the fact that I get a good job. Of course, on one hand, you have the question of survival, of course. But on the other, a good job means a good life. A good life means using good materials. Of course, more than a cycle, any day I will be much more interested in a Mercedes. So, we should go for the Mercedes because that is a better life. It's a kind of a view that was injected among us. That's what he is trying to make a point of. His major works are Authority and the Family. Just pay attention to the names and you will have ideas. Authority and the Family. You all know that family is the smallest unit of the state. Authority and family, of course, it has deep relations. Traditional and Critical Theory. Of course, where he talks about critical theory and its use over the traditional and the positivist theories. Eclipse of Reason and Dialectic of Enlightenment with Adorno. He used critical theory to revitalize radical social thoughts that we already discussed. He gave Frankfurt School a new direction altogether. His work became a base on which rational social institutions could be formed to ensure free and just life for all. This is a major point about him. He talks about the individual. He talks about how the natural forces, the natural instincts of protesting is appropriated by a culture of materials. It reminds me of the novel Robinson Crusoe. Think about Robinson Crusoe and his man Friday. Man Friday was the slave of this person who came from an outside world, collected all the resources, and after a few years, he went back to England. And in spite of begging and requesting, Man Friday, who was an African, he was not taken by Robinson Crusoe. But think from the point of view of Man Friday. Manfred never tried to protest.
Yeah.
Because he already realized that the person who came was a savior. So a kind of a hegemonic tool is always there. When you are dominated, if you are given the feeling that it is not a domination but a kind of a pleasure for you, then you will never protest. That domination will turn into a kind of a pleasure. That's what Horkheimer meant. We all know that all these people worked against fascism. And fascism, if you think that advanced capitalism and fascism have no relationship, we are entirely wrong.
Yeah.
According to a lot of critics, advanced capitalism, when you achieve it, the next step becomes fascism. Again, that is a debatable issue and that is not our topic of discussion today. He introduced critical theory as a critique of the bourgeois society. Bourgeois society, now in this decade or in this contemporary time, we will not call this a bourgeois society, but it is a consumer society. Now there are no classes, distinct classes called bourgeois, proletariat, elite, but we all are consumers. Of course, I think you will agree. Okay. So when you are criticizing our own class, our way of life, of course you are criticizing the dominant way of life. And he also located the utopian content of the dominant system. Of course, you might ask, what is the utopian content of the dominant system? We are all living in a society, right? We do not have any other aspirations other than material gains. Now, most of the times, now that utopian concept in this dominant system is the grand illusion of pleasure and life. Probably one might think that becoming fair-skinned is a huge pleasure, is an achievement.
For some people,
For
some
a lot of
it is
people, and that's what
achievement.
we have examples of advertisements, right?
Yeah.
So owning a car or owning a diamond jewelry makes you a human being. We have captions with these kinds of advertisements. So in this kind of a dominant ideology where material speaks more than humanity, this is what is meant by the utopian content of the dominant system.
Okay.
Okay. He is a very, very important person, the person I'm talking about, Herbert Marcuse. Herbert Marcuse, we all know that Frankfurt School went to Germany during the rise of Hitler during Second World War, and then from Germany to America, and then after Second World War they came back to Germany, to Frankfurt. But only one thinker never returned from America, and it was Herbert Marcuse. Why he is popular and why he is important? Because he focused on the dehumanizing effects of capitalism and modern technology on man. Now, technology along with capitalism puts certain conditions on man which strips him of his human instincts and human feelings. His works are best understood through these essays and books: Reason and Revolution, Hegel and the Rise of Social Theory, Eros and Civilization, One-Dimensional Man, which is one of the most important books, One-Dimensional Man, and an essay on revolution. Now, he introduced this term called repressive desublimation. Repressive desublimation is a kind of a post-war mass culture sexual stimulation. Of course, sexual stimulation, by that we mean a kind of culture of images and sound which will sexually stimulate us. These are the people who termed advertisements as a form of libidinal economy. Now, this kind of mass culture infested with sexual stimulation serves as a political repression.
How?
The same thing. I'm giving you all the pleasures of life. Sexual, materialistic, economic, social. So, do you have any complaints? Do you see the political milieu which is beyond all these pleasures? No, we can't.
So you mean to say that I am trapped in all this kind of things?
Yes, of course.
And I can't look beyond that?
Of course.
And
I'm not given the chance to look beyond that. Not according to me, but according to Herbert Marcuse and his work in One-Dimensional Man. So, it leads to political desublimation. We have nothing got to do with politics.
So they are controlling our minds.
Yes, according to a lot of rock bands of 1970, if you have heard about Pink Floyd, and it goes exactly with the views of the Frankfurt School thinkers.
Okay.
He also talks about alienation. Not alienation of the workers in the Marxist term. He talks about alienation of the consumers. We judge ourselves through commodities.
As you said. Like
Yes,
if I
we
have...
judge ourselves through commodities. Now, of course, everyone is a consumer. The more you have the power to buy a bigger or richer or expensive commodity, the more you are identified as a strong person in the society. Of course, nowadays that is a kind of a system of thoughts that we live in. There is no class distinction, only consumer society, and hence, if you do not have any class distinction, you do not have any kind of repulsion towards the reality, you're too settled with the reality, you're settled in it, of course, you will be politically passive. You do not have to do anything with politics, or at least the consciousness of thinking. Erich Fromm is a social psychologist, psychoanalyst, and democratic socialist. Now, Erich Fromm is a little different from the rest of the previous thinkers. His work stressed on the human nature and its effects in the capitalist system. He critiqued Freud, he also incorporated Freud, and he also incorporated Marx, and he fused these two theoreticians and these two stalwarts and their thoughts and came up with what we know as social psychology. He was, in his early years, he was inclined towards religion, and then he left, of course. But in his work, you will find a lot of biblical symbolisms. Symbolism of Adam and Eve.
Questioning the knowledge tree.
Questioning the knowledge
serpent
tree. You are having the apple from the tree of knowledge, and you're getting conscious of the fact that, yes, I am a part of nature, yet we are separate. So we have this consciousness of shame, of guilt. None of the creatures or none of the other members of the environment or nature has these kinds of consciousness. Only human beings have. So in this way, he reaches to a more valid and a more broader social perspective of authoritarianism. He talks about the idea of freedom.
If someone takes your knowledge, then
yes, he talks about idea of freedom and how the concept of freedom in our mind is jeopardized. His major works are Escape from Freedom, which I was talking about right now, Psychoanalysis and Religion, Marx's Concept of Man, On Disobedience and Other Aces, and On Being Human. So we come to the discussion of the major thinkers of the Frankfurt School, and I think our viewers will be getting at least an idea, a conceptual idea about the way these socialist thinkers used to put up their work and dreamt of changing the world as it is.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and I hope the viewer liked the show, and with the knowledge of the thinkers, they also will try to implement and try to change their thinking and think more. So maybe there could be a change, and we should be the change in ourselves to make the world change.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.